If you love what we do, then please consider supporting CryptFail on Patreon. Your support helps us grow and to create more content more often. And now, on with the show. So as you have travelled, you have entered a valley. The winter wind has been biting at you for most of the day. The road has been little more than a path, and the snow has clung to you like mud. Finally, you have been able to move into the valley, which has given you some protection from the wind. But if anything, you feel colder, as if the ice is touching your soul. So the trees have lost a lot of their leaves. It is the middle of winter. It is reasonably pretty, but the cold feels almost unnatural to a degree. It is very biting.
Rin sits atop a midnight black horse with the saddle looks pretty well made. She sits almost regally, very upright and prim and proper. You would have noticed over the past month of travel that she appears to hold a certain affinity with the horse, often spending a lot of time, especially when she appears to be upset, brushing the horse and just standing up against with almost her ear on his chest, as if she's listening to the sound of his heartbeat. Rin wears a very dark blue Jingasa hat with the symbol of the Crane clan on it, and it's tied up underneath her chin by a matching blue. Her hair, though, however, is straight black, but it's cut off around the neck level, which is very unusual, I guess, for that era.
Like a bob, or?
Yeah. But over her right eye, she only has one eye. The patch is made up of leather. It also has the symbol of the Crane clan on it.
Okay.
She is very almost dainty looking. One would think she's doesn't eat enough at dinner. She's not very tall. She's very slim. She does look fairly fit as well. Well, she wears a red kimono that is white flowers as a pattern over it, and it's seamed with a dark blue thick seam around the edges, and the belt that goes around is white. Most of the time she's fairly quiet, but that's because you would have learnt that she cannot speak. She's actually a mute. She's actually quite clumsy in the wilderness. You've noticed.
Sure.
She appears to be a kind of person that's been raised in a very well-to-do sort of household. Prim and proper. And because she can't speak, she has an attendant who is a boy who stands a lot taller than her. He's got long hair. It's tied back in a ponytail. Wears basic traveling clothes, is fairly rough. He's always carrying a bow. He's definitely looks like he's been raised on a farm. His skin is a lot darker than hers. Hers is Rin's is very pale in comparison. His first name is Daisuke, and his last name is Watanabe. And he is actually from the Crab clan, while she is originates from the Crane clan.
Ah. And how old are they?
She is 19, he is 17.
Okay.
And he's always on the lookout for potential food like rabbits and the like. You probably may have been relying on him to cook the meals, source the food and the wood and things like that.
So, my character is from the Fox clan, which we have resurrected. So it exists in our alternate universe, which is a minor clan as compared to the Crane clan that Rin would be from. So perhaps not as well known. And she is 15. So she's actually only really just become a samurai. When Rin would have met her, I think we said 3 years ago, she would not have completed her training at that point. But now she has. I guess she's also fairly quiet most of the time, but she does seem much more at home in the wilderness than Rin would. She is quite capable of finding food and seems very capable. If you get the sense that if she woke up and everyone was gone, she'd probably just be fine. Continue living in the woods. Wouldn't really be an issue. In fact, she might be happier. She would have much longer hair. And her appearance would be neat, but it doesn't seem like she puts a whole lot of effort into looking nice. So it would be the bare minimum, whatever is required to be acceptable, but not spending much time on hairstyling or anything like that. She does like spending time in the forest. She would have spoken to Rin's horse. Shigenja. She does magic. The L5R equivalent of magic. She can commune with spirits. Rather blunt and remarkably honest to a fault.
In saying that, you would have noticed that Rin is probably... She's very mellow and almost sad in a way, in the way, you can see in her eyes. But when dealing with some people, she obviously loses her temper. She gets frustrated quite easily.
Okay.
You might be because of the lack of being able to communicate.
That would be frustrating.
She's had a few issues with Daisuke, not getting what she's trying to say. She gets frustrated real easy, as opposed to Daisuke, who's
very calm
and collected, and it's always, it's all right. Things will work out.
Every little thing's gonna be all right.
Is it common that there's Shukenja? Is that the question?
That was Adam's question.
Yes.
Yeah. Less common than Bushi, being Bushi are warriors. It's much easier to create, obviously, warriors than it is to create magic users that have to be able to channel the spirits or the craft sort of thing. But it's not so rare that
it's shocking.
Yeah. All the main clans have Shukenja. Yeah, Phoenix are the most mystical. Dragon are known for it. So I mean, it's not. And there is Crane Shukenja.
Yes.
You're not all duelists. So yeah, you would have definitely seen them. My question was, have they seen you cast or commune with the spirits?
Well, that would depend on, because she's not going to say, I'm talking to the horse, and yes, I'm actually talking to the horse. That would depend on how they read into it. Like, yes, would there be yes. They would see her talking to...
Even back when, 3 years ago, when she initially talked to Rin's horse, Rin would have been absolutely amazed and fascinated by this young 12-year-old girl who could speak to animals. So yeah, she'd definitely be fascinated.
So you would know, and this is me adding in the lore that we're adding into this because it existed before and then is gone and we're bringing it back. So the family that she is from has a tradition where every generation, whoever is, I guess, the most recent direct descendant of the founder of the family, has 2 children. The oldest is trained as a shugenja and becomes a samurai, and the younger one goes off to live in the forest with the fox spirits.
Yes, I have that written down.
Yeah. So you would know that.
Yes,
So
I have that. And I've also got written down that we have noticed that you have never eaten rice.
oh, she would be eating it now.
Oh, she is eating it now.
Now.
She didn't back then.
Not in the house.
Not in the house. Okay, she's never eaten rice in the house.
Certainly not in that house. If we went to a house now, I'd eat rice.
Okay.
Make of that what you will.
Okay, never eaten rice.
In a specific house.
Yep. Rin's horse is called Amaya, and she wears a pair of jade earrings as well.
But yes, so the Fox clan, their shugenja are Kitsune shugenja, is their specific type.
Okay.
So she would be one of them. Oh, and she's got quite light brown eyes, closer to like an amber color.
Eyes?
Eyes. She has them.
Okay.
2.
Amber-colored eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That is unusual for
It is indeed.
people.
For people, yes. Yes, it is.
The valley feels darker. The wind itself, which has been howling around you, isn't getting into the valley as much. So you have some protection from the wind, but you definitely feel colder. It's definitely making you want to sort of scrunch in more. It's not necessarily unnatural, but it doesn't altogether feel natural. The trees seem a little more bare. They've all lost their leaves apart from there is a couple of evergreens that are here, but they seem a little sad. They don't seem as healthy. The snow is up to your knees, or it's about the knees of the horse too. And it's definitely a little bit of a trudge, and you're getting that very sound, that snow sound of working through it for those that are walking.
All right.
And you have been on the road about 3 days since you've seen a village. There's been other areas which have been wider. There is no wagons that you've seen, and the highways are wider and more packed, as in like the earth is, and that they're easier to travel on. But this has definitely been, once you veered off after a day and a half, it went from being what you felt was more a road that you would describe this as a path. Not dangerous, but it's definitely narrower.
Well, as usual, Daisuke is just more or less. He might have noticed that it's a bit cooler.
And how does Rin seem to be dealing with the cold?
Rin still looks prim and proper, obviously keeping a very good composure considering the driving wind that's coming through down the valley. Daisuke next to her, walking next to her, as the snow is crunching underneath his feet. He's got his Yumi bow slung over his back with a quiver of arrows. Looks around at the front of the horse because he's actually leading the horse to Byako-san.
Just looks.
He looks around to the around the front of the horse as he's leading the horse down the path at Byako-san. Byako-san, we should find shelter soon, and maybe something to eat. He looks back up at Rin, who notices that Daisuke is looking at her, and she had her arms down beside her, and she raises 2 clenched fists up beside her, and she starts shaking. She forms a C with one hand and sort of up towards the top of the base of her neck and shapes it down towards her stomach. I want to make this very clear. This is not a sign language that follows any standard current sign language. This is a sign language that she's pieced together. Him and her
This
pieced
is
together.
L5R sign language.
This is L5R. It's a fantasy setting. So while I have taken inspiration from some aspects of sign language, it's not going to be very crystal clear and legitimate.
Okay.
Because these two people have had to learn how to communicate without the benefit of, current knowledge.
Has Chiaki picked up any of this sign language, considering they've been traveling for about a month now?
Probably.
Probably. So would she know what this means or no?
Cold and hungry.
Ah, understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So she will say, I believe that would be a good idea. You agree, Saito-san?
Rin nods.
As they walk further into the valley, Chiaki's going to pause and sort of look around and almost seem like she's listening to something. And she'll turn and sort of seriously say, I don't know if we should stay here. This valley has, well, there are a lot of spirits here. Unhappy ones.
Unhappy spirits, says Daisuke.
They seem to be in pain.
Daisuke looks around. The valley is dark, but why do you say there's spirits here?
There just are. Most places have spirits, but here there are a lot, and they are all unhappy.
Movement behind from Rin as she points to her forehead, and she raises up her right hand, holding all fingers out, and then scrunches them into like a zero. Cups her hand like two tables, moving side to side at chest level, and Daisuke looks at Rin, probably a little bit confused at first, but then almost recognition dawns on him. This valley, according to Saito-san, is where a battle occurred 50 years ago.
That would make sense.
And Rin nods.
I don't know if it would be dangerous to stay here, but I certainly think it would be more pleasant elsewhere.
I do think the place of troubled spirits is probably not the best place to get a good night's rest. As he's looking around, the sun's going down in the west.
I do certainly think it would be hard to sleep.
And Rin points to herself and raises two hands in front of her chest with her hands spread out. And Daisuke nods. Saito-san is also feeling uncomfortable.
Well, I can keep walking if you can and if Amaya can.
Perhaps over that hill, but it will be past nightfall by the time we reach there. Daisuke looks around to see if there's any lights or anything in the distance. No.
Not that you can see from here.
Then I would suggest that we keep walking until we are past the battlefield.
I agree.
Daisuke starts to lead the horse again.
So you travel for another couple of miles. You get out of the valley. As you're moving into the trees outside of it, you definitely feel the spirits start to get less and less. They definitely feel tied to the valley. Maybe a mile away, there's a small glimmer of light through the trees. It's not particularly bright, but in the darkness of the night, the glow you can see.
Ah, I see light.
How far away do you think that is?
There does appear to be light over this way, but it is still at least an hour's walk away. I'm not entirely sure If it's light from a cabin or from a small town.
Saito-san, I know you are tired and hungry. Would an hour's journey be feasible? Or should we make camp here?
She nods, holds up her left arm, and points.
So you travel for about another hour,
Mm-hmm.
and you see that it is a small village, maybe 100 people. It is, for the most part, dark. The building wood overall is chipped, faded, and in some parts rotted. There is light between a set of shutters, but as you approach the village, it goes out. Further over, you can see smoke is coming from a small chimney on a building, and that there is a faint glow of light from within. Outside, what would once have been a very colourful banner is hanging gently in what little breeze there is here. It marks the building as an inn.
This place is happier than the valley, but not by much.
Definitely appears that this place has seen better days. Do you think we should try the inn?
I suppose so. At least it doesn't look as though they should be booked.
Well, we haven't seen that many travelers on the road.
No.
From my journeys from Kyoto and Kakita, I don't come across that many travelers apart from the odd samurai or the lonely farmer going into town to sell his wares that might take longer than a day. I would think that an inn in a place like this certainly wouldn't, or certainly would have a bed or two spare.
True. I don't believe many people would make the journey through the valley if they could avoid it.
So Rin's looking around and Daisuke is looking around. But I haven't certainly come across a small village as in a decrepit state of repair as this, as he's looking around.
No. Well, shall we go see if we can stay at the inn?
Before Daisuke gets a chance to answer this, Rin slides down off the back of the horse and walks confidently up the stairs to the doors of the inn.
That seems like a yes.
Daisuke nods to Byako-san and takes the reins of Rin's horse, leads it over to a post that's sticking out of the ground and tethers the horse to the post.
And Chiaki will follow Rin.
Rin's
and head
looking
up the
back
stairs.
impatiently. As you near her, she turns her head back to the door and pushes it open.
The inn is dim, the flickering fireplace casting the most light. The inhabitants, of which there are around 12, are all dressed in faded, stained, and simple clothes, apart from one. They look up suddenly with surprise, and they stare at you for a good few seconds before they bow, and they return to their tea or warm sake.
Does anyone appear obviously to be an innkeeper?
A old man is balding, with a greying beard. He comes out and is wiping his hands on his apron. He stops, seeing two samurai, since the other has not yet entered, correct?
Correct.
He quickly flattens out his apron and bows. So, good evening. I did not expect to see visitors this late at night in winter.
Good evening.
How can I help you, samurai-san?
Rin bows.
Chiaki will bow as well. And has Daisuke come back in or back in? He hasn't been in yet. Has he walked in or no? No, he's still he's hanging out with the horse.
Rin just
help you?
Holds up her hand and looks like she's throwing back a drink in the air towards her face.
And he pauses and he's like, please forgive. Tea or sake?
Saito-san?
Rin turns to Chiaki with her left hand cupped in a circle, and she pulls over her right hand and starts stirring in the left hand, suggesting that she wants tea. About this time, Daisuke enters, and he's carrying Rin's Daishio. You would have known from the past month of traveling together that even though she is a duelist within the Kakita family, and she's trained as a duelist, she's still considered an apprentice somewhat, but she never carries her sword.
Okay.
It's almost like but you're a sword fighter, you know. It's something she does not carry. So Daisuke is usually forced to be the one to carry her daisho, the katana and wakizashi.
And the innkeeper bows and he hurries off. And when the attendant enters, again, everyone who is there is really surprised. You get that same moment of almost fear before they sort of relax a little, bow to him, and return to their drinks.
He returns the bow as he races to an empty table and pulls out a chair. As Rin's sort of standing there, her left foot tapping the floor speedily. Pillow. That's like a kneeling pillow as he places it down to next to the table. As Rin is standing there tapping her left foot quite speedily. And she stops and walks over quite daintily to the pillow and kneels down on it gracefully and sits there in quiet patience. Daisuke removes around to the other side, the opposite side of the table. He always sits on the opposite side of the table to Rin. Always.
Understandable. And Chiaki will sit between them on a different side of the table. Considering there aren't many options left.
And Daisuke looks to Byakuya-san almost worried. Has Saito-san ordered?
Tea, yes.
He sighs a brief sigh of relief.
And the innkeeper returns with a small pot of jasmine tea, which he puts on the table, and 2 cups. And he says, "Oh, sorry, young sir, I did not know there was 3 of you. I will get another cup."
In his seated position, sort of bows towards him.
And it is quiet. No one is talking. No one's looking at you. They're all just looking at their drinks.
So we awkwardly also just sit and don't talk.
And he returns with a 3rd cup, which he puts on the table. What brings you so far?
We are travelling to the lands of Mifune.
That is quite some journey. What led you to our small village? It's been many years since we've been on the main road.
This is not the main road?
No, it's almost deserted now. Only a few outlying villages use the path.
Daisuke looks up at Byakuya-san. We seem to have taken a wrong turn.
It does seem that way.
Perhaps in our rush to get out of the valley, we missed the turn or took the wrong turn.
Or did the path take us into the valley? Or... Yes. I believe our wrong turn would have been before we entered the valley.
Rin, seeing the tea and the cups, she moves almost the whole top half of her body and slowly puts the cup over in front of Byakuya-san, and then another cup. She slides over to Daisuke, and one for herself, very carefully laying it down. She grabs the teapot and turns the teapot 3 times, picks it up in both hands.
Ah.
She's not performing a tea ceremony, but you can see she's being very meticulous about what she's doing. And holding her right arm with her left, she lifts the teapot up and carefully, with her left hand open, she lifts the teapot up with her left hand on top of the pot and slowly tips it from a height into each cup, carefully pouring half cups of tea for each person. First Byaku-san, then Daisuke, and then herself.
Thank you, Saito.
So she was doing this all the while through the conversation that you guys were just having. And then she puts the teapot down almost, you would think exactly in the center of the table, looks up at Daisuke and holds 2 fingers across in a V up to her forehead, looking at Daisuke. You haven't seen this before, but you might think this might be an insult.
I think this because of what? Her expression or just
her
intuition?
Expression. The way and an intuition.
Excellent. Excellent.
Daisuke glows a bright red in the dimly littered room, which is unusual for someone who's very dark-skinned. Or should I say, if he was blushing, yeah. Anyway, Daisuke just takes a deep breath.
We may have strayed from our path and found our way through a very interesting valley. We decided not to spend the night there, and when we left it, the lights of this village were the first thing we saw.
He nods as he listens. You can feel the room is very tense. When you mention the valley, especially.
Would you have rooms available for the night?
Yes, we have rooms available. We have no guests, actually, so yes. It has been quite some time since we've had actual guests. It is a rare occurrence.
I was about to ask if the locals are generally this tense when newcomers come through town.
So a old gentleman in the corner gets up, and he's wearing a long yellow coat. It's faded. You think it would have been really bright, and it looks fancy. But he's definitely been trying to keep it workable for as long as possible. So if he'd been better off, he would have replaced it. Whereas it looks like he's fixed it a couple of times. And he leaves a few mon, which are copper coins, on the table. And he bows to you. I am Nishimura, a bookseller by trade who lives here. If you come to my shop tomorrow, I will tell you the tale. It is not a story best uttered in the chill and darkness of the night. My building is the last, on the right. He bows again to you and the innkeeper, and he goes outside.
Daisuke returns the bow.
Well, I suppose your question will be answered tomorrow.
Rin looks a little bit troubled, her right hand up towards her face, cupped it like a C, and she moves it around. And Daisuke just sort of nods, looks up at the innkeeper. Would you happen to have some food available?
Yes, we have. I can make you some stew with rice, vegetables.
He looks back over at Rin, who simply nods, raises one eyebrow, the left eyebrow, and he turns back to Daisuke. Turns back to the innkeeper. How much for the food and a room for the night?
5 mon.
That seems reasonable.
He turns back and says, "My master agrees to these terms." Looks over to his right and opens up a small pouch and pulls out 5 mon and hands it to him.
And he takes it and bows.
Daisuke looks up at Rin. Have you heard of the Battle of the Valley, Saito-san? And Rin looks up from her tea. She looked like she was deep in thought. She looks up and she shakes her head. Just looks back down at her tea again and starts sipping away at it.
I suspect we will hear more of it tomorrow. I also have the impression that perhaps people would prefer we didn't talk about it now.
I agree. Daisuke looks about the room. Can Rin use sentiment to get a feeling of the room? To gauge what these people, their sentiment towards us as a group.
You're not completely sure, but you're leaning definitely towards not lied to.
It's clear that he hasn't really fabricated this on the spot, because he was more confident in the way that he expressed himself to us. So, his clothes, the yellow, is that symbolic?
Nah. Just likes yellow.
It was definitely a coat that would have been more expensive
Back in the day.
It's not a peasant coat. It's not samurai, but it's not someone who would have been poor who would have afforded that. But the fact that it has faded and has been repaired is possibly showing that times have gotten harder. He would have replaced it if he'd had the same level of income. Yeah,
so the premise for that is because she's got a certain degree of suspicion, she is feeling a little bit stressed within the situation, within being within this town. But still. Okay.
Then I assume we're just waiting for food.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes a few minutes and he comes out with a... it's like a larger bowl which he places in the middle and smaller bowls. And it smells okay. And then there's a larger bowl of rice. It doesn't smell, it's not like, oh my God, what is this stuff? It's just, it's you're definitely not under the standard you're used to, but it's not bad. Anyone who's done battlefield stuff it's better than that. It's, where you've had to rough it in the field sort of thing. It's better than that.
That would be Daisuke.
I mean, Chiaki will look quite pleased with it.
Rin would not know anything about that.
About food?
Battlefield food.
Ah.
Roughing it. I
don't know about battlefield food.
But even still, the food that, even traveling, it's not something that Rin is used to a lot, even though she has traveled. It doesn't seem like she'll ever get used to it.
Ever.
After the innkeeper brings out the food, Rin almost props herself up a little bit higher than you guys, leans over and places the food in the middle of the table next to the teapot and gives a person a bowl each, and carefully, with the rice, dishes out a serving of rice for each person, very methodically and slowly. And this is something she does even out on the road. So if you are hungry,
you get a bit annoyed.
you might feel a little bit frustrated by this. And you might have been scolded at some point if you had tried to start as soon as the food was there. And Rin grabs the broth or the stew, and slowly and carefully she holds the bowl spoon above until the drips stop dripping, and then dishes it in. And this is quite a tedious thing. Daisuke is looking longingly at the food before him, and finally, after several minutes, Rin finishes, carefully places herself back down. Daisuke waits. Rin looks down, picks up the spoon, and starts to carefully eat the food, and then that's when Daisuke starts eating. Except he's a little bit more He looks, every time she does this, he looks completely frustrated, like, you are wasting valuable time here. And he starts to dig in quite hungrily.
Chiaki will watch the whole exchange, slightly bemused, and then quite happily eat the food.
After about 40 seconds, Daisuke's finished, slams the bowl down, scratching the back of his head. Wow, I needed that.
It is certainly welcome. I don't mind the cold much, but I do admit the cold there made me feel like I would never be warm again.
The cabin here certainly has taken the edge off. Daisuke sort of clasps his hands together and stretches his arms out, looks down, back down at his bowl, looks to the food at the center of the table. He shifts from left to right, a little bit irritable, looking at Rin, who's focused on her meal. She senses a shift in atmosphere at the opposite end of the table and looks up at Daisuke, rolls her eyes and nods, and he starts shoveling food into his bowl as he's going for seconds. And for a skinny boy, he certainly eats a lot. He's not as skinny as Rin, but Rin probably takes about 20 minutes to finish her meal, at least.
While everybody watches her in silence.
And she's always silent, and she's always looking at a bowl. She almost looks like she doesn't really engage with people unless you engage with her first. She shows a lot of courtesy, and she's very cultured, but unless you engage her in conversation, yeah, you get the feeling that quite often, or sometimes, there's a certain degree of communication lost in translation, especially when going around Daisuke.
Well, it's a bit of a quiet bunch then, because Chiaki doesn't necessarily always say all that much, and when she does, there's always the sense that she's choosing words very carefully.
And Rin's looking at him as he finishes his food. He's looking quite content with himself, and then realizes that Rin's looking at him. He looks up, and she holds her right hand out with a thumb up and little finger out, but the three fingers crossed in. Yep. And like she's strumming up and down on the right side. She's like that with two hands, but doing it with one hand. Like she's strumming, and Daisuke nods and gets up from the table and walks outside, and sooner. And then...
And sooner.
And not long later, he returns with a... Daisuke returns with a shamisen.
And has she played it in the past month, like while traveling?
No.
Okay, then Chiaki will look surprised by this.
The open? No, she hasn't.
Then surprise.
Rin turns around on the spot and accepts the shamisen and begins to play.
The peasant's mood seems better overall.
And while she's playing, Chiaki will turn to Daisuke and say, I did not know Saito-san played an instrument.
Oh, yes, Byaku-san. She has played since she was 7 years of age.
Huh?
She once told me it helps her with her meditation.
Interesting.
Yes, her mother used to play the shamisen.
I see.
Ends the song. There's a number of the locals that might have been dwelling in their drinks, looking up, watching her, and they really do appreciate the song. And even so far as a few of them even bow in recognition of, because they probably haven't had some entertainment for a little while. After the song, Rin slides the shamisen back into a sort of like a cloth wrap, and she ties up the string. Daisuke turns to the innkeeper. One of these?
And he heads down a small hall. It's reasonably open, and he slides a door open. And it's a simple room, but there's enough room for everybody.
Okay. Yes, I will follow as well. The Legend of the Five Rings role-playing game is available from Edge Studios, starring RavenInsane as Rin, Emily as Chiaki, and Ghost as the Storyteller. Sounds and music were provided by Sirenscape and Nash Music Library. This has been a Critfail production. Thank you very much for listening.
She's definitely not a mistress. Is she a master, or what do you call a female master? A master still? Or 'cause she's not a mistress. She has to be a master.
Context!